This is Billionaire Mondays. Every Monday, we present you with another billionaire. Today, we're looking at 15 things you didn't know about Jakob Fugger. Welcome to alux.com, the place where future billionaires come to get informed. Hello, Aluxers. Let's see how many of you know the richest man that ever lived. Could it be a royal family member, a famous banker, or an artist? In order to locate him, we need to go all the way back to Germany in the 15th century. On March 6, 1459, Jakob Fugger was born in Augsburg, Bavaria province nowadays. He was the biggest German merchant, mining entrepreneur, and banker that ever existed, alongside famous names like John D. Rockefeller or Andrew Carnegie. Mixing a few smart decisions, good alliances, political power, and opportunity, he managed to outlive his brothers and gain a fortune of billions of dollars. How did he do it? Why was he so successful? And many other questions you might have about him are going to be answered. If you're new here, welcome. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Instagram at Alux. We did a little digging to find out just how much money he had and how he handled kings, marriage, and religion in medieval Europe. Let's get started. Number 1. He started doing business at 12 years old. Since we're talking about the medieval age, everything is a little different now and then. For instance, life expectancy was very low, quality of life was also low, and modern things such as transportation, medicine, and science was pretty rudimentary too. They're only beginning to discover that the Earth is not flat, some new substances and businesses. Jakob Fugger was pretty ahead of his time with his methods and his thinking. And since his family was pretty wealthy, he began his entrepreneurial journey quite early in life. Jakob was doing business in Venice at only 12. His family was involved in textiles, and Venice was the most important city for that industry. He was learning from the best traders how to do banking, business, and where to invest. If you start early, success comes early as well. Number 2. His fortune was the equivalent of 2% of Europe's output. Every industry has its own moguls and billionaires. For example, some people were simply there when the oil industry started and managed to make billions of dollars on an early market. Jakob Fugger was also early in investing and business, but he was a little different. Most people invested in 1 or 2 businesses or industries, and that was it. He had his hands in trading, textiles, mining, and baking all at once. He had estates, connections, support from royal houses all over Europe, and up-to-date registers and reports to keep him grounded. All of these investments are estimated to have been around 2% of Europe's whole output business-wise. He was the most prolific and successful businessman in that time. He was even more successful than Bill Gates, Vanderbilt, or Warren Buffett ever were. Number 3. The constructions built by him and his family still stand today. Although the Fuggers were not originally from Augsburg, but from Swabia, they managed to be the most successful and rich family the town has ever seen. His grandfather acquired wealth through marriage and textile trading in Italy, which he passed on to his 3 children. Even though they were the richest and most respected family, the community and well-being of Augsburg was always a priority for them. They sponsored and built chapels, monasteries, churches, houses, and lavish private residences for their family. Almost everything they built in the 15th century still stands to this day, and some even bear their name. A few facilities are still run by Fugger's descendants, and others are open museums. They even founded a few churches in Spain and Italy because they spent years doing business in those countries. Estates were big even in the Middle Ages, and Fugger knew that. Worth visiting is Fugger, the world's oldest social housing complex still in use, and Fugger House, one of their residences, if you're ever in the region. Number 4. He went on the first German expedition to India. He was one of the people that sponsored and even went on the first German expedition to India. They were supposed to be trade expeditions and business opportunities, but in fact were failed expeditions. He wanted to expand his copper trading in India and Indonesia, but spices were more important back then, so his business was better off in Europe. An average expedition to India from Europe, following Vasco da Gama's route, would take you around a year to complete by sea. Number 5. At its peak, his net worth was $400 billion. He refused to believe that you need to be of noble blood or royalty to be rich, and he proved it's possible to pull the strings and be the puppet master of those around you if you know how. He lived a pretty long life for his time, until the age of 66, and gathered a fortune of roughly $400 billion. He had more money than any billionaire today and more than most royal families back then. His net worth was basically Bill Gates plus Warren Buffett plus Jeff Bezos combined, then doubled. However, after his death, the family did not continue to be that prosperous, but they didn't fade away either. His legacy is still carried on to this day through his descendants and his buildings. Number 6. His nephew was involved in the slave trade from Africa to America. A lot of people know Jakob Fugger by his nickname, Jakob the Rich. After his passing in 1525, the family name and fortune wasn't as big anymore. Although he married Sybil Arts when he was 40, they did not have any children, so his fortune was passed on to his nephew, Anton Fugger. He went on and engaged with some shady business that started a whole racist movement in the US. He was involved in the slave trade from Africa to America. We don't know if his uncle would have agreed with the business, but we bet he made a lot of blood money out of it. Number 7. He convinced the Pope to legalize interest on loans. Fugger was also lending money to the most important and highly rated people in Europe. He was also the first German to work with the Vatican and the Pope directly. He helped them trade and transfer money from other churches, and his family helped recruit the Swiss Guard, which still exists today. Having done so much for them, he also needed a few favors in exchange. Back then, loans and interest were perceived as a sin by the Pope and almost illegal in a way, and that's why the Jews were always involved in this kind of business. The Medici family were in fact the first ones to give a new meaning to interest. They called it a penalty or handling fee. Jakob wanted it to be fully legal, so he conducted a lobbying campaign and persuaded the Vatican to change its mind about interest. The Pope came around and said if you're a lender taking risks, it's fair to charge interest. Voila! There's a real influencer. Number 8. He feuded with Martin Luther. He did have a few down points, but that's expected when you're trading and loaning money. One of his most prolific critics was Martin Luther, the German priest and teacher that founded the Protestant Reformation Church. Jakob was supportive of the church and the Pope because they were his client, but Martin Luther saw the hidden intentions in the way the two were working and did not like it. He wrote the famous thesis containing the 95 revolutionary opinions that would begin the Protestant Reformation. He condemned their lust for money and the way they manipulated citizens with their indulgences that were just pieces of paper that people were buying to make sure their dead relatives will get into heaven. Number 9. He sponsored royal families, marriages, and political alliances for his business benefit. By far the most profitable side of Jakob's business was lending money. Fugger started lending money to royalties pretty early on. He was a very dear advisor and money provider for the Habsburg family, but they were not so good managers and rulers. When Maximilian took on the throne, he had a lot of debt from his ancestors to take care of, and also a very lavish lifestyle to take care of. He was helped by Jakob Fugger to secure them all with loans and properties. With his alliance, he had Germany, Hungary, and Spain at his fingertips, Italy through the Pope, and other countries through his copper and textile business. Number 10. He lived in a castle in Augsburg. Jakob Fugger and his family were one of the richest families in Augsburg, so they were living in a beautiful castle worthy of their social status. They had 4 estates in Augsburg, a fortune of around $400 billion, and connections to royal families. You can imagine just how extravagant their main estate must have been, since it sheltered all of the family members, kitchen staff, and guests. In his honor, a statue was placed in Augsburg, and those who know about him and the locals understand why. Number 11. He was elevated to nobility title by the Holy Roman Empire and granted a coat of arms with a lily. All his life, Jakob Fugger enjoyed his alliances and relationships with important people. Having important friends is always helpful, especially when you need a favor. Jakob offered help and favors to many others, and all that came back to him as a nobility title and a coat of arms for his family. He wasn't born with any title or royal background, but he ended up having both during his lifetime. Because he lended money to Emperor Frederick III, he granted him the Lily coat of arms. Out of his marriage with Sibyl Art's Grand Burgeress of Augsburg, he was elevated to Grand Burgher of Augsburg, and from that to a seat on the City Council of Augsburg. Thanks to his efforts and hard work, his descendants are now dukes and live quite comfortable lives 500 years later. Number 12. He was the worst loan shark ever, and everyone hated him for his terms. When you have money and power, people will try to be your friend or at least be around you, because money attracts more money. Jakob Fugger understood how his clients behaved and their financial habits, so he was always around them to lend them more money and reinforce the terms of their collaboration. Some mention him as being very strict with his terms and one of the worst loan sharks of the time. If his clients didn't have money to pay him back in time, he would take their properties as collateral. Sometimes he was even negotiating payback in terms of estate, business, or precious metals. He always had a net to secure his transactions and business. Number 13. He died rich, but alone. When he died, Jakob was alone. There was only a nurse and a priest present because the others kind of hated him. His wife remarried quickly after his death and converted to the Protestant faith. Before his final breath, he wrote an epitaph listing some of his qualities and last words. He referred to himself as a great soul, pure life, and second to none in his acquisition of extraordinary wealth as his status. Number 14. He invented banking, transactions, and newsletters. Everything Jakob Fugger did professionally can be seen as a stepping stone for modern practices. He basically invented banking, transactions, and newsletters. He saw the need on the market and implemented whatever he thought was proper. Back then, sending money from one place to another could take up to 6 months. He was the first to issue letters of credit that could be carried by papal agents and exchanged from one branch office to another. This also eliminated the dangerous practice of carrying large amounts of coinage that could easily be stolen. Another thing he pioneered were handwritten reports of various businesses, politics, military reports, and social events or religion from the biggest cities and even in America. The reports can be seen as modern newsletters or the father of newspapers. Number 15. He was doing all of the accounting for his multilateral business. You'd be surprised, though, to know that Jakob Fugger was doing it all by himself. Yes, he was literally a one-man show. He wanted to know everything that happens with his business, how much money he had, how much he lent out, and so on. Basically, he needed a very good and loyal accountant. Well, he was that accountant. Money doesn't bring happiness, indeed, but it sure does secure financial stability and comfort for future generations. And now, A-Luxers, we're curious what you think about him. Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you for spending some time with us, A-Luxers. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss another video. We also handpicked these videos, which we recommend you watch next. Thank you for being an A-Luxer, and we'll see you back tomorrow.